I have a question on compensatory services. You're a certified teacher who had to quit your job, uh, in-person teaching position this year at a private school in order to support your disabled son at home with his virtual learning public school, which has not offered in-person learning since March of 2020, which is common for a lot of people in this country. Would my quitting be considered under compensatory services? He has made progress toward his IEP goals, but only because I've assisted him at home during the online classes. I have no complaints about his teachers. They have done a wonderful job in the circumstances, but virtual in general has been inappropriate for his needs due to the fact that it is virtual. Okay, so let's tackle this. Quitting your job in order to serve your disabled son at home with virtual learning, would that be a compensatory request? Yes and no. Now, yes, meaning that of course you can throw that in as a request and a due process case at the same time. Would something like that quickly be denied by a public school system as something that they would refuse to pay for or compensate? Yes. Why is that? Because nobody forced you to quit your job. And so a school system would sit there and say, well, they would have something. You have a complaint, they're going to have their opportunity to provide what's called defenses. All right. And in their defenses, which is just a nice way of saying their excuses, and some of their excuses are going to sound really good. And one of them that the school would absolutely bring up is that nobody forced you to quit your job. And then at the same time, what they would say is that another excuse would be, well, why didn't you bring this to us earlier? Why didn't you tell us that he needed alternatives, that virtual learning wasn't working? Now, I don't know. I'm just going by the scenario you provided. Maybe you did do that and you did present that virtual learning is not an appropriate way to educate your son. I don't know. I'm going strictly by your scenario. So there would be, this excuse, defenses that they would sit there and raise from, well, you didn't bring this to us. We could have made adjustments. If there was no, let's say, order from the governor to keep the state shut, or to close schools to where it was more of a school board decision or a local decision. But let's say that tutoring centers or other learning centers were open within your boundaries of your school system, then at that point they could sit there and say, well, hell, we could have paid for this. Now, the nice thing about legal defenses, once you file a complaint, is that they can sit there and make up whatever excuse they want to. Oh, if you would have just given us I hear that all the time. If you would have just given us a chance and an opportunity, we would have fixed this without the need for Galini to get involved and to draft a complaint and pick on us. I hear that all the time. But my thing is, most of my parents, we do a good job of unraveling this mystery and really bringing it to the point of what's called ripeness with regards to the case. Because what you don't want to do in legal world is file a case that isn't ripe yet. All right. And that is a legal term that we use. So in that, we walk through that process. Now, in your particular situation, the other glaring problem that you're going to have is the acknowledgement that your son made progress. Now, whether your son made progress because you were there is going to be up for interpretation. And they're going to claim ownership of the progress. And you're going to say, well, no, he wouldn't have progressed had it not been for me there assisting him in these virtual lessons. And the school's going to say, hogwash, prove it, show me. And are you going to be able to do that? And if you aren't able to show that your son would have failed, see, this is what's sort of ridiculous about trying to prove a negative. You can't really do that. And what parent is going to let their child fail in order to prove a point? And most parents are not going to do that, which is also why the school gets away with a lot of stuff. Because the parents will go out and say, well, I'll show you. I'll go out and get a tutor, or I will stay up and work with my child for 3 hours every night so that my child maintains a good GPA and does well. Well, guys, if you can't sit there and differentiate between, what is their failure and what is the progress gained because of your hard work, then they're going to take ownership of everything that you've done, and it's going to be theirs. And then to come back later and go, oh, I want to file a complaint. Well, did they provide your child a FAPE? No. But my child gets good grades. But and I've filed complaints like this, guys, they're not exactly easy. But when I do my analysis, we always look for these nooks and crannies, to where we have an opening to be able to make those arguments. But at the same time, you sort of got to understand that there are times when the short-term pain of sort of free-floating your child and building the necessary evidence that their IEP sucks, that virtual learning doesn't work for your child, you sort of got to free float. And the short-term issues are going to be your only true way of getting the long-term corrective action and the long-term benefit in fixing the problem. And just most parents aren't going to do that. They're going to prop up artificially a failing plan, a failing process. And so in your particular situation, many parents out there have not been able to work, have quit their jobs, are running themselves ragged, assuming the role of teacher in this setting. And I so appreciate you telling or stating that you don't hold the teachers to account for this, because this is the environment, and they're trying to do the best they can within these environments. And if they're still forced to live in virtual world because of the decisions of administration or the state government with regards to their COVID response, then there's not much that these teachers can do other than do their best within these settings, even though I think many of the teachers acknowledge that this isn't working for many of our kids with IEPs. But at the same time, you cannot correct these problems if you're propping up your child, and you cannot distinguish at all between what is failing and what is working, because they're going to take ownership of everything that you're doing. And that goes with normal land. If your child goes to school, but you're helping with all their homework, and you're driving your kid 3 hours a day and making them miserable, and they don't understand the material because they're not being instructed properly with regards to their specialized instruction, then guys, whose fault is that? Yes, it's the school's fault, but you got to take some ownership of the fact that you're helping them get away with it. And you got to be able to prove what you need to prove, because the burden is on you. The burden's not on the school. I don't agree with that. I believe that the burden should be on the education agency. If they have a legal responsibility to provide our children a free, appropriate public education, by God, they should be able to show it easily. But see, they play defense. We file complaints. We have to prove that they didn't provide it against a standard of tangible progress according to the child's unique circumstances, because that's the INJURE standard. Well, how do you do that? I mean, I know how to do that, but it's one of those, well, I guess that's what I'm trying to teach you guys. is that you got to understand the strategy of this as well. And sometimes you got to sort of free float to expose the failure in the design program and the fact that they are not servicing your child. At the end of the day, you're not the expert according to the law. The education professionals are the experts. And so in your situation, yeah, I mean, you can always make those requests. And is there a chance that down the road, if you end up having to go to hearing, and let's say the hearing officer says, I don't think I have the authority to award compensatory in the form of monetary to make the parent whole. Has it been done? Yes. Have I done that in cases? Yes. But the circumstances are so different. For example, most of the time where I've been able to secure the parents some of their lost work time is when the school is scheduling meetings, let's say on Wednesdays at noon, when the parent says, hey, I'm a single mother working at Walmart and I only have Mondays off. Well, what's the reason for Wednesday at noon? When you know that the parents, you're putting them in a bad financial situation and you could easily just schedule these on Monday. That would be justified. The other one is early releases of kids due to behavioral issues to where they don't want to deal with them at school. You have compulsory education laws. So the child has to be there by state law between this time and this time. And if the IEP doesn't to call for any kind of alteration to the schedule, then the fact that they send your child home and don't really notate it, all right, because that's the big one. They don't want to suspend your child because if they do, that could potentially end up in a change of placement after 10 times of doing that. So they don't want to do that. So many of these schools have figured out a nice way around it. They just early release your child, where they call you up and they say you have to come get your child. And by doing that, you have to leave your work or you're not able to go to work. And at that point, the school is in trouble on both ends. Number one, they're violating your child's plan, because the easy thing is to do an FBA and do all the stuff with regards to behavior goal and adjusting the services. But the second one is they're in violation of state law. It's not even IDEA. State law, by early releasing your child, which means that the school is not educating per the state law for X number of hours per year. And that's something that they're doing, not something that you're doing by coming in and saying, hey, go get my child, which, by the way, they would hold you to account if you were coming in doing that by giving you unexcused tardies or unexcused absences. See, they don't play the same game. But for those of you out there that have made it to this point in the video that are fascinated by this, if they're ever early releasing your child, you make sure that you do not take your child unless they provide you some form of documentation that they are early releasing your child and for what reason. Because if they don't want to provide you that, then there's your confirmation that they're trying to play a game with you, to avoid that change in placement, manifestation, determination analysis to where it would be back on them for not properly addressing these issues. But in your particular situation, from what I read in your scenario, it was a choice. I know you feel like it wasn't a choice, but they're going to claim it was a choice. They didn't tell you to quit your job. Number two, and I just basing off your scenario, if you didn't bring these concerns to them to have them deny your request for an alternative or for a tutor or for additional supports, then that would be number two. Is that, well, you should have come to us, then we could have worked something out and you could have kept your job. And then number three is you stated that your child's making progress. Well, you can't make progress and then claim that the only reason he did was because of you. It's not that I don't believe you, but at the same time, the entire point of filing a due process complaint is because the school denied your child a free, appropriate public education. And if your child's making tangible progress, then the strong argument for the school is they did in fact provide your child a free, appropriate public education. I hope that helps. But the big thing is, guys, I hope you learn from this. It's document, 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 and be smart strategically. If they're not providing your child with the services that they need, then you can't come in and play Superman or Superwoman and prop your child up artificially to save the school system um, uh, from themselves, and not exposing their crappy programs. That's the only way change occurs. And sometimes you got to free float your child in order to accomplish short-term pain for long-term benefit.